Section 10.4, Installment Buying. A fixed installment loan is one on which you may pay a fixed amount of money for a set number of payments. Examples of fixed installment loans include college tuition loans, loans for cars, boats, etc. They're usually repaid in 24, 36, 48, or 60 equal monthly payments. An open-ended installment loan is a loan on which you can make variable payments each month. Examples of these are credit cards. The Truth in Lending Act in 1968 required the lending institution to tell the borrower two things. The annual percentage rate is the true rate of interest charged for the loan, and the finance charge is the total amount of money the borrower must pay for borrowing the money, interest plus any additional fees charged. The total installment price is the sum of all the monthly payments and the down payment, if any. We'll use this table to work some of the problems here, and this table is laid out by the annual percentage rate and then the number of payments, and it tells us that this will calculate the finance charge per $100 of amount financed. The formula that we can use if we're going to go this way rather than using that table is an installment payment formula, where M is the installment payment, P is the amount financed, R is the interest rate as a decimal, N is the number of payments per year, generally 12, and then T is the time in years. And I want to point out in the denominator here, if you notice in the denominator, there's a negative exponent. That's really, really important that you see that, because otherwise you're not going to get the right answer when you work the problem. So if you notice right here, there's a negative exponent. So let's work an example. Kristen wants to purchase new window blinds for her house at a cost of $1,500. The home improvement store has an advertised finance option of no down payment and 6% APR for 24 months. Determine Kristen's monthly payment. So we're going to use the formula. The amount she financed was $1,500. The APR as a decimal is 0.06. 12 payments per year for 2 years. So if I put the numbers into the formula, I'm going to go ahead and simplify the numerator first, and then I'll work on the denominator. The numerator generally will simplify to a pretty simple number. And if you notice on the next screen, let me just go back for a second. What I did was take the 0.06 and divide by 12, and then still have the 1,500 there. And the same thing in the denominator. I took the 0.06 divided by 12 plus 1, and then I simplified the exponent. And then in the numerator, I went ahead and multiplied. I get 7.5. And in the denominator, I took my 1.005 and raised it to the negative 24th power. And you notice you're always going to get a number here that's less than 1 because you have to subtract it from 1. So that was my next step. And then finally, I divide the numerator by the denominator, and I get a monthly payment for Kristen of $66.48. Now let's talk about her finance charge. So remember this table I showed you before. It shows the finance charge per $100 of the amount financed. And you have to go and look at the number of payments, which was 24, and her interest rate was 6%. So she's paying $6.37 per $100 financed for the 24 months. So she financed $1,500, so we want to say how many $100 increments are there in that loan, and it's actually going to be 15. So we're going to multiply the number in the table by 15, and we get an interest paid of $95.55. We can also find the total interest by multiplying out the sum, finding the sum of the payments and subtracting the loan amount. So if I take $66.48 times 24 payments, get that product, subtract $1,500, I come up with $95.52. It's a little tiny bit different, and it's only because of rounding. In order to make some home improvements, a homeowner spends $20,000. He paid 15% down as a down payment and financed the balance of the purchase with a fixed installment loan with an APR of 4.5%. Determine his total finance charge and the monthly payment. So he's got to put 15% down, so he's going to put $3,000 down. How much did he finance? He financed $17,000. And he's doing this for 36 months. So if we look on the row for 36 months, and the interest rate is 4.5%, so that's $7.09 per $1,000 financed. And he's financing $17,000, so if I take $17,000 and divide by 100, there's $170 $100 increments in his loan. I'm going to multiply that by the finance charge. So his total finance charge is $1,205.30. To find the monthly payment, what you're going to do is add that finance charge to the amount borrowed, $17,000, and then divide by the number of payments, which was 36. So his monthly payment would be $505.70. This would be the same answer that you would get if you used the formula instead of using the table to get the interest and then calculating the payment in this fashion. Ilka purchased a new computer on a monthly purchase plan. The computer sold for $14.95. Ilka put 5% down and paid $64 a month for 24 months. What finance charge did she pay? Okay, so this time the only way we can figure that out is to take the monthly payments of $64 times 24 months. We also have to figure out how much she actually financed because she had a down payment. So she put down 5%. So she actually financed, instead of $14.95, $14.20.25. And so then we're going to take that and figure out what her finance was there. And then we're going to figure out how much she paid total, $64 per month times 24 months. So she paid a total of $15.36. So the difference between $15.36 and $14.20.25 is going to be the amount of interest. Now we want to know what was the APR, because the problem didn't tell us that. So the way that you calculate that, you're going to take the finance charge divided by the amount financed and multiply by 100, and then we can use table 10.2. So if I take $115.72 divided by the amount financed, multiply by 100, I get about 8.15. And remember, she was financing for 24 payments, so we look across that row and we go to the number that's closest to the number that we found, which is right here, so her APR is 7.5%. An open-ended installment loan, a credit card, is a popular way of making purchases or borrowing money. Typically, credit card accounts report the following. They tell you the daily periodic rate for purchases and then also for cash advances. Typically, the credit card monthly statement contains the following information: the balance at the beginning of the period, at the end of the period or the new balance, the transactions for the period, the statement closing date or the billing date, and then the payment due date, and the minimum amount that you must pay. For purchases, there's no finance or interest charge if there are no previous balance due, and you pay the entire new balance by the payment due date. The period between when the purchase is made and when the credit card company begins charging interest is called the grace period, and it's usually between 20 and 25 days. However, if you use a credit card to get a cash advance, there's generally no grace period, and the finance charge begins from the date that you actually borrow the money. John's credit card company determines his minimum monthly payment by adding all new interest to 1% of the outstanding balance. The credit card company charges, now notice this is a percent number here, so to calculate the decimal, we're going to have to divide that by 100. This number per day, 0.039698. On March 17th, John uses his credit card to buy plane tickets for $2,600. He makes no other purchases. Assuming no new interest, determine his minimum payment on April 1st. So his minimum payment is 1% of the balance due, which is $26. On April 1st, instead of making that minimum payment, he makes a payment of $500. Assuming no additional charges or cash advances, what is his minimum payment on May 1st? So his new balance now is $2,100. First thing he's got to pay on May 1st is 1% of that balance, which is $2,100. I'm sorry, $21. The other thing he's going to have to pay is interest on the $2,100 for the month of April. And if you remember that interest rate that was shown before, we divided it by 100 to get the decimal. So $2,100 by 30 days times the rate per day, $25.01 of interest for the month of April. So we go ahead and add that to the $21 minimum payment, and we come up with $46.01, but the credit card will always round up and give you a minimum payment, in this case, up to a whole dollar of $47.